Do you really know who lives next door? Well, hopefully you don't have to figure it out the hard way. Today we have 5 creepy stories, and luckily we are accompanied by Mortis Media. If you would like to hear more from this talented narrator, you can click on his icon. Now, without further hesitation, let's begin. Number 1. So, around 10 to 12 years ago, I lived in a little 2-bedroom house on a long road. It is a terraced house on a long strip of other terraced houses. Back in the day, all the attics were joined and you could literally travel through them. Years later, they realized it was a bad idea. Fire spreading, burglars, etc. And so, all the attics were bricked up so each house was secure. One night, I was soaking in the bath when I heard a noise above me. Thinking it was an animal or something, I just ignored it. This went on for a few weeks. Only, it was getting to the point I would hear the noise only when I was in the bath or getting changed. I got a friend to check out the attic, and he told me he didn't see anything, which just confirmed my animal story. Not much happened after that for about a month or two, when one night I was alone. I was getting ready to take a shower as I was heading out with friends. I heard the same noise above me, when all of a sudden the dog started going crazy, barking and looking directly above me. Clearly, I was freaked out and decided to get ready at a friend's house. The next day, I was outside my house when the neighbor shouted at me. Now, my neighbor is creepy as hell. Small, stinky, and strange looking with a hint of crazy in his eyes. He asked me if everything was okay. Being polite and trying to show him he doesn't really bother me, I said yes and went about my business. Just as I got to my door, he asked if I got to my friend's house okay. At first, without thinking, I said yes, thank you, smiled, and waved goodbye. When I got inside my house, I realized, how did he know I was at a friend's house? Unless he heard me on the phone. And, as I was so creeped out the previous night, I was practically whispering to my friend. Anyway, I phoned my family members, told my dad, and they all came round. They turned the lights on in the bathroom, but kept all the other lights off. Opened the attic door, and you could see 2 lights shining right through the top of the attic. 2 little holes. My bathroom ceiling was quite dark, so I never noticed them. My dad went into the attic. He was gone a while, but when he returned, he was blazing angry. He ignored everyone and walked straight outside to the neighbor's house. We heard him shouting for the neighbor to open his door, but he was not home. I asked my cousin to go upstairs into the attic and check it out. When he came back down, he told me that the wall separating the attics had been knocked through. Most of the brickwork was on my side, so it was knocked through from the other side. We called the police, but they told us there was no proof he had done anything. The neighbor told the police he had never used the attic and the previous tenants may be to blame. Clearly, he was to blame, the dirty pervert. I don't think I have ever been so disturbed, knowing that he had been watching me for all that time. I never stayed in that house again. Number 2.
A little background information before I get started. This happened to me in my junior year of high school. I lived about a 5-minute walking distance from my school, and my dad left for work every day around 5. So I didn't have a car, and I walked to and from school every day. Most of my neighbours were fairly nice, and if they were outside whilst I was walking around, they would usually say hi or something to that nature. I had lived in this neighbourhood for years, so I knew almost everyone. Every day on my way from school, I would pass this really good-looking guy outside his house, usually smoking a cigarette. He would say hi and finish smoking, and I walked towards my house. Nothing unusual. After a while, he built up the nerve to talk to me. He was really cute, and for me being an awkward teen girl, I was thrilled by this attention. He would make small talk with me, nothing weird at first, and it went on for about a week. After a while I noticed that he would be outside his house every day in the morning and after school, like clockwork. This made me feel uneasy. He would start talking to me every day after school, asking if I was single, if I wanted to get coffee, if he could have my phone number. I came up with excuses every time. Then he started asking me to come inside. This was a red flag. He was clearly older than me, maybe 23, and I started to notice that he shook, like a lot, and that his hair was starting to fall out. This made me feel even more uncomfortable. Somehow he got my phone number, and he would text me, excessively, always asking me to date him and come to his house. He actually came to my house one day and asked my dad if he could date me. My neighbourhood knew my dad very well. They knew not to mess with him or me, so my dad told him to stay away from me. That worked for a while, until one day my dad went to his house to help his mother with something, and he told my dad how much he enjoyed watching porn and thinking of me, and how he wished he could date me. My dad pretty much told him to never come near my house again or he would regret it. Well, about a month later during the summer, I was hanging out with a group of friends when we went outside to see cop cars outside of Creeper's house. Cop cars in our neighbourhood weren't too unusual, so we shrugged it off and continued to hang out. After about an hour, we got back inside to see more cop cars and a helicopter circling. By this time we were more than curious, and so we stuck outside to see what was going on. After a few minutes, a K9 unit showed up, followed by a SWAT vehicle. They surrounded the house, and after a good hour, they pulled him out and into a cop car. We found out that he locked his mother out of the house, barricaded all the entrances, and when the cops tried to get him out, he told them that he had guns. Lots of them. I found out later that he was a drug addict and a schizophrenic.
Number 3. I live in a small rental building in Santa Monica. My very friendly neighbor shocked everyone by suddenly divorcing and moving out before Christmas. Their apartment has been vacant since then, probably because it's effectively a 4th floor walk up. Last week, my girlfriend Kelly was staying over. She shook me awake in the middle of the night complaining about loud music coming through the bedroom wall. I thought I heard something for a moment, but by the time I was fully conscious, it stopped, and it didn't bother us for the rest of the night. It's only occurred to me in the morning that someone must have finally moved into the vacant apartment. I mentioned the new tenant to my super, Dimitri, over a game of chess. Dimitri is around 40 with a beautiful young wife and a baby daughter. He'd been an engineer in the Russian military and could fix anything. And growing up, he trained to be a tournament chess player. I'd never beaten him, but I managed a couple draws. Dimitri told me that the next door apartment was still vacant. We agreed that the acoustics in the building could be deceptive, and the music must have been coming from another apartment. Then, he proceeded to beat me for the 17th consecutive game, after I blundered away a slight but genuine edge. Early the next morning, I went out for a jog, and when I returned, the supposedly vacant apartment door was halfway opened. A big German Shepherd was sitting on the threshold. This was very strange, since we've only got 2 small dogs in the building. And this wasn't one of them. He was enormous for a shepherd, with a beautiful coat of tan and black fur, with a spiked leather collar. My mind cycled through many possible explanations. I quickly rejected all of them as unlikely, and arrived at one undeniable conclusion. I love dogs. So, I reached out to pet him, and he bared his teeth and growled at me in a way that made me take 2 quick involuntary steps backwards, and I banged my head against the opposite side wall. I felt sure I was about to be attacked, but the dog didn't move a muscle. He just stared at me. Like I mentioned, I love dogs. I grew up with them, and I can't remember being scared of one without a very good reason. This one had me paralyzed with fear. I still can't figure out why, because he wasn't doing anything obviously threatening, not even the low growl from deep in the throat, nothing, but I was afraid to blink. Finally, he turned and walked into the other apartment. I heard his claws clicking on the bare floor, but heard nothing else. After a few moments, I unfroze, fumbled with my keys, and rushed into my own apartment. I called Dimitri, and he said he'd be right up. I suggested that maybe he should get the police, but he just laughed at me. Russians don't use the police for a dog. I decided not to ask him what Russians use for a dog. And he told me he'd knock on my door when it was safe for me to come out. Then he laughed at me again and hung up. I waited in my apartment for 20 minutes, half embarrassed for having overreacted, half worried that I hadn't. I called Dmitry. No answer. I took a quick shower and then called him again, this time from my bedroom. No answer. But I heard something faintly through the bedroom wall. A cell phone. I hung up and redialed. More ringing. Dmitry's phone was next door. I had a panicked vision of Dmitry laying in a bloody mess after getting mauled by that dog. So I grabbed the metal folding chair for protection and rushed out into the hallway. There was silence, except for my pounding heart. I edged down the hall. The neighbor's door was all the way opened. I unfolded the chair and held it in front of me when I thought I detected a growl from inside the apartment. But through the open door, I saw only bare floor and heard nothing at all. I called Dmitry's name. No response. I was shaking from the strongest adrenaline rush I've ever felt. I could barely sense myself holding the chair, and I was seeing everything from an oddly detached but hyper-real perspective, almost like a video game. It didn't feel like I was walking when I moved into the apartment. It felt like I was floating. The door opened directly into the main room. It was empty and unfurnished, and illuminated by pleasant morning light coming through the 3 big windows on the opposite wall. The shades were rolled all the way up, and one of the windows was cracked open. But I could hear street sounds from outside, and that had a momentarily calming effect. The bedroom door opened into darkness. I called Dmitry's name again and again, with no response. I strained my ears to hear for growling or the scrabbling sounds of claws moving on bare floor, but heard nothing. I stepped into the bedroom, holding the chair up like a lion tamer. I stopped and looked. It took a few moments for my eyes to adjust. Just a little dim light seeping around the edges of the drawn shade. At first glance, the room was empty. I stared into the far corners, and my eyes seemed to want to resolve the shadows into the shape of a crouching dog. But there was no dog. I relaxed slightly. I started to lower the chair. Looking down, I saw a shape at my feet. With no conscious awareness of how I did it, I was suddenly 3 feet outside the bedroom in a ninja defense stance with a chair up to block the onrushing dog that I saw, heard, and felt charging at me through the door. For a few moments, I was in a movie skipping frames, standing in the bedroom, outside the bedroom with a vicious dog exploding through the door, outside the bedroom with nothing, no dog. There wasn't any dog. Just a gut-wrenching hallucination that lasted a fraction of a second and left me gasping for breath. I must have leapt back 5 feet and badly sprained my ankle, but adrenaline shut down the pain and I didn't feel anything until many hours later. Meanwhile, cold fear replaced panic. As I thought about the shape on the floor in the bedroom, I peered inside. I edged forward with the chair held high. Lying flat on his back, just inside the doorway, was Dmitry. I stared at him, expecting him to vanish too, but he didn't. I put the chair down. I knelt at his side. No blood. No signs of mauling. Was he breathing? I couldn't tell. I felt for a pulse at his neck. Nothing. But my hands were shaking, and I forced myself to take a few deep breaths and tried again. I felt something. He had a faint, thready pulse. I called 911. The rest of the day went by in a blur inside the hospital. I stayed with Dmitry's wife, Alina, whose shaky English had disintegrated under the pressure of the moment. It was a major heart attack, but Dmitry had a chance to pull through. At first, the doctors thought angioplasty would be enough, and when they wheeled him out of the procedure room, he was conscious. They stopped in the hallway so he could talk to Alina for a minute. She waved me over, just as they started to wheel him away. Dmitry looked up at me and said, "That was no dog." Then a nurse pulled me back as Dmitry disappeared into the ICU. I never had a chance to ask him what he meant, because he ended up needing double bypass surgery. He was in the OR for hours, and only Alina was allowed into the recovery room to see him. I finally got a chance to visit him on Monday. He doesn't look so great. but Alina seems confident in the doctors, and they say he'll live. Apparently, it's not uncommon for patients who go through major surgery to lose a couple days worth of memory. Dimitri doesn't remember anything about what happened, and has no idea what he meant by saying it wasn't a dog. I haven't been back inside the vacant apartment. Alina said she searched every inch and only found Dimitri's big heavy flashlight in the bedroom. Otherwise, it's completely empty, including the shelves and closets. She had the lock changed, just in case, and now it's shut tight. Kelly heard the whole story and refuses to sleep over anymore. She wants me to move out, but I'd rather stay, at least until Dimitri gets released from the hospital and I can welcome him home. Maybe he'll finally let me win a game of chess. Number 4.
So, I was living in a block of 6 apartments, and one of the other residents would periodically do some really crazy stuff, like accuse the neighbours of spying on her because they were on their porch and she could see them over the fence between the properties, or accusing me and the guy I live with stealing her post, or just having shouting matches late at night with whoever was around. The police were called on her repeatedly, but they didn't do a whole lot. She escalated to smashing the glass panels out of the door to one of the other apartments and going inside because she was convinced that they had stolen her mobile phone and milk powder. She proceeded to scrawl a whole lot of Bible-related nonsense all over the wall outside of their place. Now that you have a good idea of the backstory, this is where we begin. So one night she was having a loud argument with herself, and consequently, the neighbours above her, which are beside us, got sick of her noise and engaged with her in the shouting match. I grabbed my MP3 player and began recording her, trying to get her threatening people so that the police might actually be able to do something more lasting than take her to the psych ward for a brief holiday. I've still got the recordings and a transcript of what she said, despite this happened almost a decade ago. The people who took her on for the shouting match wanted her to shut up and go home, and she wanted them to back down. I was content to record from my back balcony. That is until she actually decided to go through with one of her threats, which was to get a knife and a brick and go get them. Bolstered by her previous experience of smashing the glass from doors and reaching into the open and locked door, she got the biggest knife she could find and a brick and came upstairs. I relocated and started recording again.
You! Come to the door! You! Come on! Do you want to mess around with me? Yeah, you want to mess with me. Alright, where's that little sneak then?
The male and female occupants jumped from their back balcony to the ground floor and began to run, calling for people to get the police. I had stopped recording at that point and stepped outside to see if they were alright. That was my mistake. The crazy lady stepped out, saw me, and target locked. I noped out of there, closing and locking the door in one smooth motion, then grabbed a large stick, a replacement broom handle, I might add, and intended to stand my ground if she decided to come after me as well. Well, by now I think she'd lost the brick, but she was quite content to smash the glass out with the butt of the knife. 3 good hits and the glass broke. Moments later the door swung open. I could have swung at her or something, but I knew damn well I'm a bark and no bite kind of guy. She grabbed the stick and tried to pull it. I held on for a moment and she swung the knife upwards at me. I gained the ability to teleport, and about half a second later I'd made my way through the living room and through an internal door to the bedroom and pulled it shut behind me. I still remember the faux Mr. T style chains hanging on the door handle, making it difficult to grip and keep pulled shut as she tried to come after me. Having lost her primary target, she decided to destroy our place, which was the next best option. We listened. Computers were thrown from desks, our TV was thrown to the ground, standing cabinet full of CDs pulled off the wall onto the TV, tables covered with stacks of magic cards tossed across the room. Everything on the walls was pulled down. She even went to the back and hurled our laundry at the neighbours below us. We were just holed up in our bedroom, furniture against the door, using a very old cell phone. This was the only thing we had to call out with, and we were trying to get the cops there. Eventually, the noise subsided. Far too long after that, the police arrived, about 40 minutes after the drama had actually died down, because apparently there was someone else with a more dangerous weapon who was taking up their attention that night. As we emerged to assess the destruction, blood and debris was everywhere. She'd cut herself up in getting in, we figured, and got away relatively unscathed. It turned out there was an impression of a knife on my shirt made in blood, and we spent the night in a neighbour's couch and spent the next week cleaning up the mess. All in all, despite her rampage, no one was seriously hurt, nothing was seriously damaged, and she got evicted. I thought it would be the last I'd be seeing of her, and it was for the most part, until I was waiting in line for the supermarket, and someone gets too close behind me. I turn to look, and it's her. She says,
"Well, look who it is."
like we shared some kind of funny experience. I had to resist the fight or flight instinct that kicked in, but we got away from her in a hurry. The last I heard, she kept her word on doing it, going for crazy please, getting out and doing it again. However, the last time she tried her little stunt, she ended up locked up.
Number 5. Okay, so I've had a few issues with my next door neighbor since I moved in, but nothing creepy until just recently. There's a man, a woman, and at least one boy living there, and I mostly just avoid them. The man seems okay, but a bit weird, and the boy just keeps to himself. The woman is a bit off. Not long after we moved in, the woman left a note in my mailbox. Our mailboxes are right beside each other, between our houses. Anyway, I stood at the mailbox reading the note. She thought my dog was pooping in her yard. It was possible, as our fence had some holes in it that our dog could have gotten into, but those holes had been fixed some time ago. Still, no big deal, except I noticed her standing in her driveway just staring at me, and the note was very long, so I kept reading it. The more I read, the crazier it got, and the stranger her behavior in my peripheral vision became. Apparently, I was entitled. She seemed to think I was somehow instructing my dog to poop in their yard. Her note went on a tangent about how awful dogs are. She was also 100% convinced it was my dog. Even though there are always tons of loose dogs, cats, and wildlife wandering around, and no doubt traveling throughout her unfenced backyard. In my peripheral vision, she got into her SUV, backed out of her driveway, then parked it along the street directly behind me, and just idled there, staring. The note went on a weird, long tirade about the previous family to live in my house, saying I was another Deb, as if I'd have any idea what that was even supposed to mean, then concluded in some odd insults, and some implied, but not quite threats. This was the closest thing we've ever had to a conversation at this point. I can understand not wanting a dog pooping in her yard, but this was a bit of an extreme reaction, as this was literally the first time I'd ever heard of there being a problem. A simple note would have done, but this note was insane. She was still staring behind me, so I decided to ignore her and go inside my house. That's when she shouted out her window, "Are you playing a game?" That reaction made no sense. "Are you nuts?" I replied, as I officially ran out of patience. She shouted more nonsense and insults at me while blocking my driveway with her vehicle. While I repeatedly told her to leave before I called the cops, This went back and forth like that for a while, but she eventually sped off when I pulled out my cell phone. Later, my boyfriend, who had not been home at the time when this happened, had a chat with the neighbors. He said they seemed agreeable and reasonable, and basically dismissed me for just being dramatic. The woman told a very different version of events. Of course, I was annoyed that my boyfriend wasn't taking me seriously, but I let it go. I think he just wanted to keep getting along with the man next door, as they sometimes borrowed tools. They speak to him a lot differently than how they speak to me, and they don't do anything rude to me while he is around. In fact, they don't speak to me at all when he's around. They always wait for him to leave. The next time I need sugar, I think I'll go to the store. If you guys enjoyed, please feel free to like, comment, and if you would like to hear more, subscribe. Also, we put together 5 chilling Home Alone stories on Mortis Media's channel. If you would like to hear it, you can click on the video link on the screen. It seems sometimes we can't even be safe in our own homes. So, you guys stay safe out there. Until next time.